to the Friendly Aussie Podcast, and we're here with the LDP candidate for Division 2,
Anthony Bull.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Anthony. I'm pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Just got to clarify. Not an LDP candidate. I'm actually a part of a group. It's called the Liberal Democrats Ipswich. We are strongly associated with the party, but we're not of the party.
Of the party.
Cool. Have to make that distinction.
Thanks for that.
So I guess let's start with, when is the vote for the councilman position?
28th of March.
28th of March. Okay, so a month and a little bit.
Yeah, a month.
By the time people hear this, probably about a month.
Yeah.
So what kind of plans do you have for the city of Ipswich?
Well, I suppose the main three things that I'm focusing on will be trying to get fairer rates. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean looking at opportunities to explore the budget a little bit deeper, because we can get into what that all means in a second. And see if there's opportunities to reduce excess spending on like potentially corrupt backroom deals that were done, or just just gratuitous spending, mm-hmm. and then give that excess recovered money back to the people.
Yep.
And ensuring as well that future rate rises are done only if it's fiscally reasonable to do so, not because, it's inflation and that means we get to put your rates up.
Yep.
Yeah. The other two main areas are accountability. And this is very important for Ipswich, because many people listening to this podcast may know, but others don't. Ipswich's council was pretty much completely dissolved.
A bit like Logan's, right?
Oh, yeah, pretty much. That happened around about the same time. I feel like Ipswich was worse, because I don't know if the Logan mayor is in jail, but I think the Ipswich mayor was either put in jail or he's still in jail, but
yeah,
there was definitely talk of jail.
Yeah.
So when your former mayor may have been in prison or may be in prison now, it's not good. Something must have happened, and it must not have been good.
He probably wasn't smoking a doobie either.
No. Yeah, it would be. I would have preferred he was smoking a doobie. All right, that would have been a much better thing. I'd have been like, you know what? Cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. I'll vote for you anyway, because you got stoned and you went to prison.
Mm.
You know?
It doesn't matter if you're corrupt.
Yeah. Well, I would have preferred, if I found out the corruption, I'd say I'm not going to vote for you, but,
Would you rather a corrupt pot-smoking politician or a corrupt non-pot-smoking politician?
Well, I would take the corrupt pot-smoking politician, because I would feel like he'd be very chill.
Yeah.
So the amount of corruption he could do, probably very little, because he's just like, man, I just want to chill.
I just want to chill.
Maybe I'll buy Netflix with public funds. That's like $19 a month as opposed to $2 million a year.
Oh man, that could be an interesting government incentive. We're buying Netflix and Disney Plus subscriptions for anyone under who earns less than $25,000 a year.
Wow!
Just roll it out.
Wow, so that's government sponsored
entertainment
for private corporations like Disney.
And the
corporate welfare.
I didn't even think of it that way.
The third main platform I've got is better roads for Ipswich.
Yeah.
So that includes the local roads. A lot of people in my area are saying, in Division 2 where I'm running, are saying that the local roads kind of suck, which is really interesting, because roads make up a majority of the budget. Mm-hmm. So
True.
Either it's not being funded enough, and I find that hard to believe, but it could be true. We need to investigate that. Or the money that is being allocated there is not being used in an efficient and effective manner. Because, if it's consuming most of the budget, you'd assume you'd have pretty good roads.
Was it the Logan one where the road outside the mayor's place was the one that was being paved, and it was pretty much in good nick, and that came first before everyone else's, his area, where he was literally living, the streets around him?
It's really common if you think about how councillors do things. They look after their immediate area, and especially in front of their little office.
Well, you need to have good roads to drive your Mercedes on.
That's right. Yeah. That's very true.
Apparently.
There's a lot of questions when it comes to how people who are our representatives end up in these kind of positions of councillor or mayor, end up, I guess, behaving in that office and how they ought to behave, I suppose. It's kind of something that I wonder about, what are you thinking is needed within kind of the Ipswich area at the moment when it comes to questions of accountability? What do you think that you could bring to the table in terms of ensuring that these rank corruption scandals don't occur again?
Some of the things I think that we need to do is understand that people, power can corrupt you, as an individual. I don't know if these people went into politics with corrupt intent or if it came about as a result of the amount of power they had.
I guess you'll find out.
Yeah, exactly. But there's the thing. In order to stop that from happening, we need to put safeguards in place to prevent corruption. And I've always held the belief that the strongest regulator of a bad government is not some independent organization, but a well-informed voting populace.
All right.
So what I would be looking to do initially is the Ipswich City budget, as an example, compared to other city budgets, is incredibly light on detail. It doesn't tell you enough information about what is being funded where. You go to some other city budget, like what you see in Sydney, and there could be 50 pages that gives nice structured details about each category, what's being funded there, and potentially even giving a little bit of explanation if it needs some. Accountant notes, which is what you expect in like a corporate finance document. In Ipswich City Council's budget, at least their last one, it had 5 major categories of expenses, and they didn't explain what those categories were. They just said, this is covered under maintenance, this is covered under material, this is other expenses, this is employee benefits, and I can't remember what the 5th one is. And then they don't say.
That's a real lack of transparency.
Yeah, exactly, right? So if you were looking to actually engage in any form of corruption, I know for a fact I would slip some of that into those expenses because you'd never find it.
Yeah.
Right? It'd be so easy. But if you put that in there, people can then review it and say, hang on, what is this? Why are we paying for that? That will be exposed as something that tied back to you. Now, we currently already record and put on YouTube our actual council meetings, but nobody watches them, okay?
Yeah.
Nobody's going to sit and watch 10 hours of people on YouTube talking about local politics. Maybe if you're really stoned, you will, but that's because...
I might.
You might.
Mitch might.
But you're not really watching it. You're just like, oh, I'm just going to watch something. Fucking, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? So my other suggestion would be that let's just do what they do in the federal government. In the federal government, they have a program called Hansard, which is essentially the recordings.
Sorry, yours have just spilled.
I just missed my mouth with my water.
It happens.
Anyhow, continue.
Yeah.
So essentially, the recordings of what happens in the actual chambers of like the Parliament or in the Senate are they're recorded and transcribed into a written database that you can then search.
Oh, yep.
So that should be done for Ipswich itself. Like there is software out there if you wanted to go down that route. The cost of probably implementing that would be less than 0.01% of the actual annual budget of the city. But if it's a publicly accessible database, you could then tie into any expenses that are being listed in the budget to individuals or discussions of that expense and find out who's voted for it and find out a little bit more detail on it. So instead of just being like, oh, this guy is corrupt because he voted for X, but you don't know anything about it, you can then see, you can look it up. And as well, adopting standard accounting practices is a good idea. Like in the Ipswich City budget right now, rates or the revenue from rates, I couldn't believe I saw this. And I checked with one of my friends who has an IPA, so it's an accounting certification. Essentially, the current projected or amended revenue for this year is, I can't remember what it was something like 275 million. Except the exact figure was what was anticipated from last year's budget. So they anticipated they would have 163 or something like that last year for this year. And then they just copied and pasted essentially the same number. Nothing changed. How does that make any sense?
Yeah.
It should be like, what do we get in the last 10 months and project it forward to cover the 12 months? So stuff like that needs to be done, and more accountant notes or some sort of third-party regulator, not a third-party regulator, what are they called? What are they called? When like they're a business organization, they
like a books person.
Yeah, not a books person. I'm trying to think of what those groups are. They're like Deloitte. They're God, the name escapes me.
I'm drawing a blank too. Look, Google it. I'm not telling you to Google.
Auditors.
I'm telling the auditors.
Auditors, that's it.
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be too much to ask to actually
cut
have the actual budget be audited,
Yeah.
just to make sure everything does comply. Because
Sure.
the way I see it is, if I was an investor, let's say, and I do a lot of investing myself, I look through a lot of accounts, annual reports of companies I'm looking to try to invest in because they might be a solid company. I wouldn't touch Ipswich City Council with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
Because it is so much going on under the surface that I don't know about. Like, revenue's projected to go up. Expenses are also kind of projected to go up, but not at the same rate that revenue's projected to go up. But cash flow's going down.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense. If you're thinking of bringing in more money and the amount that you're going to pay is growing, but it's not at the same rate that you're bringing it in, where the hell is the money going?
Yeah.
You know?
That's awful.
Yeah, it's terrible, right? And this is
Is there
what
just no
needs to-
accountability when it comes to councils because they're like a state government kind of entity? Or
Well, so what I understand is that the councils, they are kind of regulated a little bit by the state government, but the state government just says, here's a list of things you can do. You do your own thing now.
all right.
Yeah. So there is very little accountability for councils. And councils have to be motivated to make that accountability themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, Ipswich was doing the whole burning their or sending their trash to other countries, right?
Yes, they were. And that's another concern that people seem to have is that they don't want to become basically the Queensland or Australia's giant dump.
Yeah.
And there was concerns that that was kind of an agreement that may have been signed, which brings into another thing that I'm looking to do. Because let's run on the assumption that the last council was corrupt. We don't know the depth of that corruption. What needs to be done is all previous agreements that were signed in the last 8 years or 2 council terms should be reviewed. And if it's skeptical or suspicious, it should be retendered.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we don't know whether what was signed is corrupt or whether it was in the interest of the people. Because if the people were really providing, like those service providers were really providing the best service at the best price, well, then they wouldn't need to engage in any form of corruption because they would just get the contract.
Yeah.
So I feel like there might be something there. We should at least have a look at it to make sure that it's all above board and all okay.
Sounds very reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're on a podcast, I'm just curious. If you got in, could you start the Ipswich City Council podcast? I think that'd be good. I would like governments to do podcasts.
I could. I mean, if I wanted to.
Because you're talking about before, like, no one wants to listen to a 10-hour talk. What if there was like a weekly summary of the talks where you kind of had a chat with maybe someone that was involved or maybe a local person who was interested in politics? I'd really like to see that dialogue happen in politics.
Yeah.
It doesn't, because podcasts are inherently like way more transparent than most things, unless they're being edited like crazy, but then you kind of know. That's just something I always thought would be interesting.
I don't have a problem with something like that. My issue would be whether it was coming from the city council or for private independent citizens.
Yeah.
Because I definitely don't think it should come from the council, because when the government is able to control the flow of information, they're able to tell you what they want you to believe and keep out the stuff they don't.
Yeah, okay.
But it could be something like the QT, which is a local newspaper, could have a podcast.
And they should be getting on local members and things. I'd really like to see that across like state and federal. Someone that really kind of grabs a member and chats to them for an hour, and it's like an unedited cast, like, and get their true opinions and beliefs on like issues. Because right now, all you ever get is a soundbite, and that's really frustrating.
Yeah, and a lot of the news media coming from, or just being propagated throughout Australia, it's got an agenda. It's got a very ideological tang to it. And I mean, it's not necessarily that that's a bad thing in news. Like, everyone has their own opinions, and that is part of how the news is interpreted, etc. But the way that it's presented as fact, and the way that like a lot of these news organizations just exist within the cultural and economic frame, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense.
They have certain. Have you read like? I guess the main one is Noam Chomsky's work. Like, he talks about the propaganda model.
No,
kind of thing.
I can't say I have, but I did study propaganda at university.
Right.
Or as we call it, advertising and marketing. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And a lot of that is just like, the people who get to, regardless of whether you're a government or a private entity, the people with the power to distribute information get to decide how that information is distributed. So they have like, the ability to shape opinion. And that's become more fluid as the internet has developed and evolved. And in a way, like the question is, how do we move from a situation where it's not locked down by like the Murdoch press and corporate media?
Yeah.
Because they aren't accountable to the people either.
Yeah,
you know?
I definitely think that the Murdoch press, or when you got maybe these large corporate medias, are a bit of an issue. But I think the internet itself has been one of the biggest blows to the...
and they're losing money.
Yeah, they're losing a ton of money.
Yeah.
Like, I know that a lot of people will say, like, Murdoch's they won them the election. And they definitely had an effect for, like, the Liberals. But because of the power of, like, the internet and of independent media, even your guys like your podcast here,
sure,
I feel like that power and influence has eroded from what it was back in like the 80s.
I agree with that.
Definitely Rupert Murdoch won Margaret Thatcher the election in the 80s.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's slowly slipping. You can see it. Maybe in another 10, 20 years, they probably won't have a strong foothold at all. The only question will come down to is how regulated our internet gets. That's kind of, I think, the big fears for a lot of people. It's like right now we're living in the world of the free internet, or mostly. Like, Google still kind of fucks with your results a little bit.
Yeah, you've got Facebook and Instagram.
And they kind of tailor things to you. But for the most part, if you want information on something and you want that other side, you'll get it. You'll find it.
Maybe at a cost, at a value cost.
But one of the things like I've seen is like, you've got China that has their big firewall and like they're not letting that outside information in nearly as much. And I've heard Russia's also starting to play with those ideas. And even the European unions and stuff, they're kind of talking about like everyone's trying to kind of create like a intranet effectively, like their own kind of closed circuit internet, which is terrifying in my world.
I reckon it's just because the free, open, expressive developments that are occurring, inside and outside of the market these days, they actually threaten established powers in the status quo.
Yeah,
there are a lot of creative people doing awesome shit, and they threaten the existing systems of power. So that's something to look at, I guess. If we can actually, I think that they're getting more aggressive about that because they're no longer like just sitting pretty in their position of being able to control public debate.
Well, yeah, I feel like not only with the internet, but I'm going to bring up blockchain as an example. There are actually like smart contract-based applications that are looking to try to decentralize the internet. Some of them are kind of BS, but some of them have some amount of promise.
I'm such a crypto nerd that like...
Oh my God.
Oh, really?
When you mentioned blockchain, I'm just like, he's got my heart.
Oh, really? I love blockchain as well.
Blockchain's just incredible. Yeah. Like for me, like the idea
blockchain is pretty cool.
Of what's possible with it is just beyond, I think, anything we can actually even comprehend yet. The thing that I think excites me most is the idea that you could create a platform like YouTube and you could say load up a bunch of coins, your credits on YouTube, and then the creators who make that video directly get a small portion of your coin for watching that video. But then
Steam it.
Yeah, Steam it's a good one. But then I think one of the cool things would be the creator could also go, I actually want more money for this because I spent fuck tons of time making it or whatever reason they have for it, and go, I actually want $1. And you get a prompt and it's like, okay, you have to give a whole coin to watch this video because it's maybe a movie or something, and they get it directly and not any third party, and they can actually show what they want for real value.
If you want to talk about like ride sharing, for instance, that would revolutionize things if you didn't have Uber or Didi taking like a cut.
Yeah.
Advertising as well.
Yeah.
Right? Because like one of the biggest problems with advertising is when you're advertising on Google's search ads, this person then goes to your website, you don't know necessarily if they're the same person who came from Facebook. You have no way of tracking them in the actual flow. With cryptocurrency or like through the basic attention token as an example, you would be able to do that. And that would just revolutionize the entire marketing landscape. So like there's so many applications for blockchain, and I'm a huge supporter of it myself.
Yep.
I don't know if the party necessarily has a stance on blockchain, but I personally do.
Right. I was wondering if
I actually did see LDP today. They put up a post about accepting other forms of currencies and making that standard. I saw that pop up today, and I was like, oh, thank fuck, someone's mentioned something.
Yeah, as far as I understand, the policy is that we are open to accepting other currencies, but not necessarily having a specific policy on blockchain. That's as far as I understand.
It's interesting because what could happen to the Australian dollar if, a lot of people moved on to Bitcoin or the
A
variants.
lot of people should move on to Bitcoin.
They should
but,
fucking do it.
yeah.
All my savings. Not yet, but almost.
That's how I'm helping to fund some of this campaign. I'm like, I got to sell some of my Bitcoin.
Yeah.
All right, done.
I've had a very good month with Ethereum. I think I'm up like 40% this month.
Yeah, it's been good. Yeah.
It's been a good month. It's been really, really, really good.
I guess you just have to, I don't know, like be one of those analysts when it comes to how things are fluctuating. And
you just got to actually follow what's happening.
Yeah.
What's the trend? You don't even need to be that clever with crypto.
Fair
You
enough.
just need to actually follow what's happening, and then you can actually just ride that boat.
You
Find the
trade
experts.
the trend.
Yeah, trade the trend, exactly. But okay, we're a cannabis podcast and we haven't actually talked about cannabis, so let's throw that in somewhere.
quickly pivot over to weed.
All
Have you
right.
smoked weed, councillor,
Oh, no.
elect?
Potential counselor.
Oh, yeah, I have. Yeah, of course I have.
Yep.
Yeah. I've done it. I did it once, and I didn't. It was fine, but I never really got into it.
Yeah.
Like, I myself have a actual condition called idiopathic hypersomnolence.
That's a lot of
It's
words.
a lot of words, but the long and short of it is that I wake up every day tired as.
Oh, okay, yep.
Yeah.
So for me, any type of like drug that makes you sort of more mellow and chill is not something
Yep.
I want to do.
Right.
Because I'd just be more tired.
Yep. Are you aware of I don't know how much knowledge you have on cannabis, but are you aware of indica and sativa, like the two different types of cannabis?
No.
Okay, so this is interesting because you're saying you'll fall asleep, etc. But there are cannabis varieties, sativa strain. They came more from like the Afghanistan kind of region where they produce a lot of hash. It's actually an uplifting high. It's actually more energetic and it actually gets you up and quite mobile. It still has a bit of a drowsy effect because it is in that vein, but it is actually a much more of a stimulating effect. And especially if you're getting plants that are like 100% sativas, those things, like a particular strain is called green crack. It's called green crack for a reason. If you have green crack, you're going to be you just kind of can't stop. So it's really interesting because one of the things we're trying to do at Fab is educate the general public and even just regular people who smoke cannabis, because a lot of them just sometimes don't know, especially in Australia because the culture hasn't been formed yet, about these kinds of things. Like,
like even
not all
about
cannabis is the same.
how there's a lot of hybridization
Yeah.
at the moment. Like I don't think you could say that any one strain is pure sativa or indica.
No, you can.
Anymore.
The way that works is your land races, right?
Ah, yeah,
So land races are strains of cannabis that have been growing in like a region for millennia, and they've effectively become the most potent in that area.
Sure, yeah.
So the Durban poison that comes from South Africa, that's a 100% sativa that grows
Wow.
2+ meters tall. So it's effectively a fucking tree.
Damn.
But that's a really strong energetic high.
But I guess they're an exception to the rule.
Yeah, the land races are really where a lot of it is, and then you have to hope that you're mixing. But generally, yeah, you're not finding 100% sativas. But a lot of the time now, you do have that, especially in the States, This is what's really frustrating when you've got an unregulated market.
Just so behind.
It's just, how would we put it? Like, the knowledge isn't there. People don't know what they're smoking a lot of the time, and
Well, I think it's a lot to do with the fact that they've made it illegal so that people can't innovate. Like, you look at the United States when they started making it illegal, there are people out there, not just like you or I we might be like, I'll put $1,000. There are millionaires, billionaires out there who'd want to put in 10, 20, $100 million into investing into cannabis.
And
Yep.
they are.
Yeah,
And
they are doing it.
actively.
But they're not going to touch it if it's illegal.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
of
they
course.
have to go underground, and you don't have the education and this sort of diverse understanding of the different crops. Like, I had no idea about the two things. It's such a complex thing now.
Isn't that like bizarre? Like,
Yeah.
what your assumption is, weed makes you sleepy and dopey, has now been flipped.
It has, yeah.
And it's like, what's going on? Like, and like, for me, we were talking about the internet before and what it's actually enabled. Cannabis is like exploded because of the internet, right? People have now started to be able to talk and express and share ideas. Before, the only way that would happen is when you'd meet people and a bit of books. And that was really how people were doing a lot. Amsterdam became like kind of a central place where a lot of breeding for cannabis plants was going on.
It's funny because I don't think that like the usage has increased all that much, but it's probably the connectivity of the culture.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of people who actually know each other and can do shit together.
What's amazing is Australia has some of the largest cannabis use in the world.
Really?
Yeah, it's
And,
true. And has
yeah.
for decades.
It's been very consistent here. I think partly because we've got the kind of climate, and in general, Aussies are kind of chill, so it kind of just matches with the lifestyle. Things I often think about is like, how much tourism dollars are we losing out on?
Yeah.
Things like that. Like, it's just absurd.
Well, how much money do we make in alcohol sales every year that we could be like increasing by legalizing marijuana?
Excise is probably one of the biggest revenue raises for government.
I mean, I'm not a fan of taxation, but you know, it will be taxed if it was legalized, and there is some budget there.
Yeah, you could imagine how high it would be taxed.
That's my other concern too. If it got legalized, they'll say, no worries, we'll make it legal, but we're going to tax it on the same rate as cigarettes, even though that makes no sense whatsoever. It makes no sense to tax the people who are smoking at the moment the rate that they're being smoked. But they'll just say, oh, this is just for, you know, just to make sure that healthcare costs that might happen, and we'll keep it all safe. The same thing would happen if they went with vaping. Yeah, you know,
the vaping is something that really upsets me more than cannabis all the time.
Is really coming down on vapes at the moment. Right?
Yeah, have you read the recent study actually that got? So that study that came out that said, oh, vaping is linked now to heart attacks.
Whoa.
Yep.
Right, that was something that sort of triggered off Donald Trump saying, "Oh, you know, vaping sucks."
Yeah, it's because there was vitamin E contamination happening.
Yeah, right.
So the other thing is, though, these people who did the study came out and said, actually, we looked back and we need to sort of rescind that actual paper because the people who were doing vaping were also ex-smokers, and we didn't factor into the actual like model whether their previous smoking was contributing to it.
Yeah.
And so that thing that came out to scare everybody is now being pulled off.
Yeah. The other big one that popped through was I don't know if you know what dab pens are. It's probably is newer tech for you. You might know. But dab pens are effectively THC oil, right? So you've extracted the oil out of the bud and you've put them in a cartridge and you hit it like a vaporizer. So very similar to like how nicotine vapes work, but you're not using the PG, VG stuff. You're using actual oil and the distillate that helps kind of make it not as thick. But that's where these deaths came from, apparently. And a lot of people are like, people are dying from cannabis. What the fuck? No one's ever died from cannabis.
Yeah.
Like, right. And like, for me, I'm like, wait, what? And what's actually happened is you've got the black market. And even maybe potentially some of the legal market because of like not being regulated enough, where they've used moldy buds, they've used not sterile equipment to create this oil, and there was this vitamin E toxicity that came through in these oil cartridges, and it actually caused lung failure and all the sorts of things. It wasn't a result of the cannabis; it was a result of
the process.
And, you know, obviously not having any form of regulation is just kind of...
And a lack of education around how to do these things. Because a lot of people, especially in Australia, they'll create their own fucking dab pens.
Yeah.
And they'll fuck it up.
So, like, the way... one of the extraction methods to get the cannabinoids and THC out of cannabis is to pump butane through it, through a really high-pressure kind of tube. So you fill a tube up, put your buds inside, and then you run a can of butane through it, and then at the bottom it's dripping out onto a tray, and then eventually that butane would evaporate, and the oil left behind is your oil that you can smoke.
Yeah.
But butane is highly explosive.
Yes.
And also kind of toxic if you don't.
And it's,
But were these being done in like sort of back rooms sort of areas? Yeah, okay.
Can be.
But this is all a result of government inaction, you know? Like, this is why it happens.
They can make a choice now to open up the whole space.
They should open up the whole space, because if you open up the whole space, these kind of backroom things, they will still exist, but they'll be very niche.
Yeah.
And most of it will be like highly industrialized, sort of like highly mechanical. And that might rob some of the soul of it, but it will increase the safety, you know, because you want to keep more of your customers.
I wouldn't be against like, you know, oversight and licensing, stuff like that, to make sure that people who are actually producing this shit mass scale are at least like hitting a certain standard.
Yeah,
that's at least my opinion, but I know that there's definitely room for, you know, forces that have been enforcing prohibition to kind of like legalize, in quotations, you know, where they either hike up the prices in the legal market, making illegal markets attractive to people, or they do something silly like, you know, limit the amount of plants that you can grow in your house, or just stuff that really prevents people from actually having a legal plant around.
See, like, you have the Greens guys, right, on the federal level. They've put up the idea of legalizing cannabis and having a government body help regulate it and be a wholesale distributor.
Like an agency.
We don't need that.
I don't think we need that either.
Let me tell you why okay, so this is coming from my personal background. I don't want to speak too much of it because we've just gone through it. But having an independent regulator organization is the worst idea you could ever have, because it's not that it's like this independent organization that sits there and is really interested in people's health. They might be. They might be also misinformed about people's health. They might be using bad data. And if you bring in new data, the laws that regulate that agency might say, look, you might have this great data here, but the laws we have to follow and interpret clearly say, well, we can't listen to you.
But what about, we have a productivity commission here in Queensland, which is an independent commission, and they just recommended that we decriminalise not only cannabis, but MDMA. So that's policy, evidence-based. They're not fucking up. They're doing their job. Why can't we have something like that for cannabis? Like I'm saying that there is room for corruption there.
Well, what you could have as well, though, is if you were to have, as the flip side of this, is you get something like the TGA.
Yeah, all right.
So recently, the TGA came in and basically nearly wiped out the entire sports supplements market by trying
the TGA, man.
Yeah, fuck them, right? I totally agree with that, because like they didn't seem to care about what would happen in the supplement market. And the Goods Act itself, as a great example, has special exemptions for homeopathic medicine. If you're really caring about people's health and all that stuff, you wouldn't have exempted homeopathic medicine.
Sure.
So that's my concern with regulators. Like, yes, they can do good, but it's when bureaucrats sort of work within legislation to try to get the benefit for themselves.
100%, and that happens. So we need to be careful if we're going to propose something like that. For sure.
See, because like there definitely needs to be regulation. There's no doubt in my mind.
Who watches the watchers?
Yeah, who watches the watchers? Let's get another body. It's the multiverse.
But I think it brings back to my original point, where I think that the best regulator of anything is individuals who are more well informed.
Okay.
So transparency as well, because the free market, I believe this, and I know a lot of people in the Liberal Democrats do believe this, that the free market can regulate itself. As long as individuals are not, being deprived of information by sort of government regulations.
Yep.
And I know people will disagree. People are like, it's bullshit.
I want Mitch's opinion on this, because Mitch has some really interesting thoughts on the free market.
Yeah, I think that there's no such thing as a free market, and that it's a kind of abstraction. If we're talking about, a certain field of economics, Milton Friedman, Hayek, that kind of thing, plenty of economists who follow that kind of thought. I just don't know. It's a bit like communism in the sense that it's never been tried. And we kind of exist in a spectrum, like a political spectrum. Look at our economies today. We live in mixed market economies. So we have this, this whole like property rights thing that we talk about, where individuals get to have their own property. That's enforced by the state. That's a legal right. And that's actually enforced by the military and by the police. So if you're thinking about that, that's force. That's force upholding the market, which is supposedly free. So, and that's the thing. There are class dynamics within the market at the moment. We're talking about people who are insanely rich, billionaires, who, even if you were back in the fucking Roman age or Egyptian age when the pyramids were being built, right? Which is way, way older than the Romans, just to clarify. You'd have the situation where if you started with $0 and every day you added $10,000 to your bank account and you allowed for inflation up to today, you would still not have like $10 billion. That's what we need to start talking about, how there's just this insane concentration of wealth and power. Yeah. And I'm not trying to get into the argument of like capitalism versus communism. What I believe is that there needs to be a space outside of markets and states. Because if you don't have that, people don't get freedom. They don't have the ability to be free because they're either being controlled by the market or controlled by the state. They either have to follow supply and demand, or they have to fucking follow a bureaucrat.
Or the state works with the leaders in the market.
And that's the thing. They are cohesive. They are together. There's no such thing as the market, and there's no such thing as the state. They work together and have worked together for hundreds of years. They don't exist independently, and they will never fucking exist independently. That's what we need to get with.
So we need to abolish the state.
Abolish the fucking state, cunt. That's what I believe. And I'm actually more of an anarcho, I'm very left-wing, like I believe in communitarian kind of shit.
So you'd be more like an anarcho-syndicalist?
Yeah, anarcho, like I call myself a communalist because I believe in Murray Bookchin, that kind of thing. Yeah. Like the idea that we need to be basically in harmonic... In harmonic like dynamics with the natural environment, because we are the natural environment. Yeah. For as long as we're using the market, which is this thing that needs to continually expand at a certain rate and accumulate, that is its basic dynamic of the capitalist marketplace at least, to accumulate capital, right? Which is basically money, capital, and then money squared. Kind of like it expands. And the whole point of that is that you're not taking into account the externalities, and the externalities is the natural world. And we're facing an extinction crisis as a result of that. So if we rely upon the market to solve our problems won't be solved. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I agree with the abolish the state part.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
For me, the way
I agree too.
the way I look at how Mitch says it, really,
Yeah.
the way like I kind of break it down, just because I relate everything back to cannabis. I love weed.
Yeah, bro.
Right. So
Dude.
like the way I look at it is, say you had a free market for cannabis. The people who are going to end up succeeding in that free market are people who already have so much wealth. Right. It's not really a free market because me, as say, like, you know, the classic mum and pop store, we're not going to be able to get in because there's going to be over-regulation, and the only people who are going to be able to get over that are going to be the people who have the money.
Well, that's true. Some of them will be those wealthy people. There'll be others will be those who found startups or other sort of
For sure.
corporations.
It's
so
just-
yes, the wealthy people can get wealthier, but then you will have the other innovators who will come in and join that wealth.
It's just the end for me. A lot of these markets, like cannabis or not, it's just like that entry to get in is so ridiculously difficult because of everything that comes with anything.
That kind of power concentrates ultimately. That's why you see stuff like duopolies, monopolies develop within the market, and the state doesn't regulate the market to prevent that, right? Because they are in cahoots with the market, just like the market is in cahoots with the state.
Yeah.
So there's this situation where, okay, if we're talking about cannabis, right? There's a lot of stuff that we can relate back to letting people make their own decisions and all of that, and freedom and expression. I'm really about those values and those ideas.
Yeah.
And I think that there are ways to develop like something like that in the market. The problem is that you have a kind of competition or a zero-sum game within the market. So people are actually competing against one another for dominance within the market. And that, I mean, there's a space for that, and I don't have to always speak to what's right or wrong. But what I do think is that the cooperative spaces, right, where people can actually, like maybe a cannabis club or like a place where people can actually share their resources and ideas, and all of that is profitless and it's seamless and it's like transactionless, you know, and it's free in a sense that isn't developed within the market, where you do need to have these things. So for me, like, okay, imagine if you could get a lot of what you need, like basic needs, just from the community, because you give to the community gives back to you. That's actually how I see politics and economics. You know, like politics is something that's relational. We're thinking about relationships here.
Yep.
And talking about relationships, and we can decide to compete against one another, and we do within the marketplace, the modern one, the contemporary one, because that is the dominant value system of our society. But we don't have to always be doing just that.
Yeah.
We could decide to do a variety of things.
Yeah,
you
and
know?
if someone wants to voluntarily join an organization or group like that, that sounds fine to me. I mean,
I want to do that.
yeah, like even people who are strong capitalists will join organizations like that. It's just for some other thing. I mean, you could be like, as a contemporary example, might be like if you joined a board game society.
Sure.
You know, and you're basically just there to hang out, spend time. You become friends with people. You bring your stuff, they bring their stuff, and you play. And I don't know why I thought that, but you know, it's an example.
It's to plug the ultimate sesh that we're making.
Yeah, come and play a card game.
Coming soon, December.
Yeah,
2020.
yeah. Like wait out.
It's
And then when it gets to November 2020, you'd be like,
no, we've literally like tried
April
to plan this
2021.
backwards. We planned this backwards, going, we need to get this done by this.
We actually have some. Actually, those aren't trading cards. I have some trading cards at home, which I'm just gonna like stick on, and Josip has this as well, and Veronica. We're just gonna like create our own card decks.
That'd be cool.
We're
them
just
as,
doing
a
like
test
normal
run.
decks, and we're trying
You
to
should
get the
get like
testing.
Magic the Gathering cards, and then go to Friday Night Magic with your with your thing like glued on, and then when you start playing, they'll be like, "What the fuck? What is this?" It says, "Get me a joint." Right? What is it? What do you think it says?
Come on, man.
And then
Where's
they're
my
like,
joint?
I can't do it, and it's like, well, then you lose.
Game over. I win.
It's we're in 2020, and I think the world. It's going to be a really interesting year. What happens on the political landscape, particularly with the US and the Queensland election,
no doubt.
because we were talking to Michael Berkman last week, and he was telling us like it's interesting how disgruntled everyone in Queensland is. No one wants that Liberal government to come back in because of Campbell Newman.
Yeah.
But no one's particularly happy with the Labor government at the moment.
Yeah.
They're pissed off.
Everyone's pretty pissy. Is this the year where the minor parties actually have a chance to come up in Queensland?
I definitely think they have a shot. Personally, this is my personal thought. I definitely think they have a shot, and it's worth putting all of your money and effort behind them if you do believe in those principles.
Yeah.
My problem with sort of like the way that the current state government and even just like lower house is set up is that in order to win, you kind of need to get 35% of the vote minimum first preference.
True.
Because then you try to get through on preference flows. So like as an example, One Nation, who had, of all the minor parties, we'll call them minor party, probably had the biggest support in Queensland. The last state election, they got 20, 25%. And now
like
a lot of people don't like them. I'm not a big fan of them, but still, this is a contemporary example. They didn't get any seats.
Uh-huh.
You know,
That's not really fair, is it? Because like they were a portion of the population.
Yeah.
For me, I think we said this with the Berkman one. I don't think parties should exist. Parties fundamentally shouldn't exist. It should be on the individual that we vote for, not some sort of party ideology. Because how can everyone be like, yep, I agree with everything these people say?
Or even I don't know, like a region just decides on its own, like it has a big fucking meeting and it goes, all right, this is what we're going to go for. And we'll take a delegate and the delegate will decide and there'll be a big meeting with the delegates, but they're just like representing a region. So it's not like, party politics or whatever. It's just like how to get problems solved.
look, trying to get rid of parties would be great. I think that's the ideal for a lot of people, but parties are a natural evolution of politics.
Yeah.
Because if we didn't have parties, guess what it would be? It'd be a whole bunch of independents with ads funded by other organizations.
True.
Or it'd be something like, instead of the Labor Party, it'd be the Labor Coalition of unions.
Yeah.
We support this candidate in that area.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
That makes sense.
I guess the thing is, right, it's the voting systems in themselves. I mean, Australia is better than the two-party kind of like...
Australia's preferential system is
first past the
pretty
post
good.
kind of shit,
Yeah.
But I think there's plenty to be said about, like, because you've got those two majors in there, they're not going to create some massive electoral reform that empowers these minor parties in the crossbench,
I do say that the best way, at the very least, of eroding their ability to continue to have this duopoly of, I don't want Liberal because Campbell Newman, right, versus Labor kind of sucks, is vote for the minor parties because those parties, those major parties, everybody who gets like a certain percentage of votes gets electoral funding.
Yeah, it's like
100%.
I don't know what it is in state. I know federal. It's like
It's a
$2
significant
a
amount.
vote,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. It also acts as a very good indicator that, yes, our policies are great. So if you had a Liberal candidate who's like, we have these policies for the entire Liberal Party, and he wins, or Labor, he's not going to change his views because why would I? Why would I raise a big mess or a big, whatever we want to say?
Don't rock the boat.
Don't want to rock the boat. That's a good one. Yeah,
that's it.
He doesn't want to rock the boat because maybe he wants to actually be on cabinet in Labor. So I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm not going to say anything. I'm winning just fine. But if they start to see, as an example, in a Labor seat, so over time, their vote's starting to go out to places like the Liberal Democrats or even the Greens. They're going to have to go, oh, crap. Maybe I need to go and steal some of their policies. And whilst I'd prefer the Liberal Democrats didn't have its policies stolen by another party, 50% of what you want is better than the 0% that you get.
Yeah, that's
no
it.
doubt. And those parties or those individuals who are representatives who are outside of that duopoly, they have the potential to mix things up and present new policies. And even what you were talking about, like studies and public information campaigns, all of this stuff can make an influence on the
Big difference
on the parliament, I guess.
Absolutely.
One thing I have, I wouldn't mind getting your thoughts on. I personally do like the Liberal Democrats' idea of small government, right? But do you think that's a problem in Queensland where we've abolished the upper house? Isn't that a fucking pickle?
It is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Unicameralism.
I'm very... Well, see, with small government doesn't mean we wouldn't have an upper house. Yeah, I think an upper house is great because it acts as a nice check and balance.
It's your auditor.
Yeah, essentially, it would be some form of an auditor. Whereas a smaller government is more like the government's interactions with the market and what it provides.
What do you think about like parliamentary salaries, that kind of thing? There's a lot of, I don't know, government subsidized retirements and stuff like that.
So from what I understand, like any of the retirements, they no longer exist for ones if you're elected now.
Yeah, they did remove that.
So I'm fine with that. The salaries, they are quite high. And I feel like for something like federal, that you are getting paid a significant amount of money. But and the problem with saying what I want to say is that it'll make me sound like I'm being classist or something like that. But a lot of these people were experts in their fields or very strong, came from very, maybe they were CEOs or maybe they were
High-level lawyers.
Yeah. They were getting paid probably more than they were in their actual role as a
That's
MP.
true.
So having at least a high enough salary to attract people to like that caliber to stay is not bad. It also can potentially prevent corruption if we have the transparency in place. Because if a person is getting paid roughly the same amount they were getting paid in the private sector, they probably wouldn't act any different than they were in the private sector.
Yeah, it's just, those kickbacks.
And whilst, we could lower the salary, that's really just more of a gut thing. Like, I hate politicians.
Yeah.
But
It's very populist.
you don't save that much money in the budget by doing that. So it's probably not the smartest idea.
So you're more interested in what politicians are spending public funds on?
100%, yeah.
Okay.
Because like if a politician's making a decent amount of money, okay, fine, whatever. But if he's then spending your money, that he's not allowed to spend the money on something for himself or for deals that he gets little kickbacks on, that's 100% wrong.
Yeah.
That's
And
an abuse
the
of
whole
your trust.
revolving door thing as well, where people can enact a certain policy that will just benefit a developer or an interest or even just a certain
Well,
demographic of people.
bringing it just back to cannabis really quickly, Malcolm Turnbull and his wife owned a fucking huge portion in a medical cannabis company. And they also, I think they also owned a lot in like a pharmaceutical company. So like there's an invested interest going, no, of course I don't want to legalize recreational because they would lose out on that. Because for whatever reason, politicians really don't understand, or maybe they do and they just ignore it. Recreational and medicinal cannabis, same fucking thing. It's the same goddamn plant. Just because you grow it behind fucking walls, it's really weird. What we're seeing is you're going to slowly get these people out of prison, but you're going to put these plants into a prison because they're literally behind bars with giant fluorescent lighting. So this is the kind of stuff that I think maybe needs to be more transparent. Should we maybe be able to know where investments of a politician belong? Because that would allow you to see where their biases are.
Their tax returns and stuff.
Yeah.
I think they do have to declare their actual investment.
Is that
interest.
public though?
I think it is. I'm not. I don't quite. Well, you can quote me on it all you want, but because my quote is, I think so, but I don't know for 100%.
Yeah. Because it's that sort of stuff. But the other problem is
because like I do remember Clive Palmer. He had to submit how much of his assets he had, and his was like 15 pages or something.
Yeah.
So I do think there is some it might be publicly available. If it's not, it definitely should be.
Yeah.
No one should have to be ashamed of as a MP if you want to invest in a particular industry or do something like that. Sure, but we should at least know. Yes, you've got to invest in this, and if something comes up that might contravene what you're invested in, absolutely, you should probably either say it and step aside, or you can still vote, but you need to say it. All right, and people would then need to question whether or not
there's a public. Yeah. I think the other thing that it comes back to for me, publicly in Australia, and probably all I can really speak for is Australia. People here, just general citizens, we've just given up on politics as a whole. The majority, we don't know what's even being said in Parliament, apart the sound bites we get through socials.
So there's no grassroots in electoral politics. So it's replaced by I don't know. You have, I guess, lobbyists, people who are like, I can get this done if I can lobby the government to do this.
I think there's a sense of defeatism amongst people who want change because it's very hard to bring about change, and you see it all the time. You'll have people who are really geared up and energetic to make change. They're going to think they're going to get 10% of the vote from their candidate. Oh yeah, awesome! And he comes out at 1%. What's the point? You think
everything just drops.
But it's like the things that you want to change are worth fighting for, and if it takes you 20, 50 years. Doesn't matter. If you strongly believe in it and making a better future for all of Australia, you should be pushing
it constantly. This is why I haven't given up on fab. I the one thing, for me, one of the most interesting things politically about cannabis is the amount of political change cannabis can bring to the world. See, cannabis has, for me and many other people I know, helped unlock areas of their brain where they start to question things.
It's also just a wedge issue. Yeah. If you think about it, it's kind of one of those things that if you start asking people, hey, why can't an individual decide what to put within their own body?
Yeah.
Why is the modulating our own consciousness effects pedals for the brain? Why aren't they legal? And then that whole range of questions about the freedom of consciousness and the freedom of the ability of a person to control themselves come up as a result of that. I think
if we wanted to take a dark, sinister path in that train of thought, you could say maybe that's why people are so hesitant.
I would agree, actually.
100%.
Actually, I personally just think that they're hesitant because not now. I think they're coming around, but 10 years ago, they were like, you know what? That's like a issue. Maybe 5% of the people are screaming about, and 10% of my electorate might not like it. So I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist.
It's a numbers game.
Yeah, it's kind of that.
Yeah,
but I like what you thought.
I think for the most part, right? You are kind of correct in the sense that we haven't reached critical mass, and that's probably a better or more simple explanation than I've given. But I don't know. We've had prohibition for. Remember how you had prohibition in the US? Maybe that's just a different society and culture and different times, so different circumstances, and it's for alcohol. But what I'm saying is that you have a substance that has been made illegal by the government, and within 8 to 10 years, it's legal again, and all of the problems that were associated with it were acknowledged. Whereas with this case, no.
Cannabis is just so deeply rooted.
The weirdest thing about the prohibition of cannabis versus the prohibition of alcohol was that if you were going to make one prohibited, I recommend you don't do either, but alcohol 100% because of the issues of addiction.
Yeah, it's toxic.
It can kill people and stuff. Yep. So, but then, cannabis is the illegal one. I'd find that to be the weirdest thing.
Sure.
There's such a disconnect between that. It's always the argument we always come to, and cannabis, they often try and break it down into, you could have a psychotic episode, it's psychoactive. Meanwhile, as you said, alcohol could literally kill you.
Yeah.
I'd rather go fucking crazy than fucking die.
Yeah. And isn't it more that you would already be predisposed to have that issue?
See, even that's starting to get a little more disproven as time's going on. There is those links, but we've met a variety of people who have bipolar and those kinds of mental health issues. And some of them have gone off meds and are just smoking cannabis to manage it. And it helps
I reckon
them
it would totally work for some people,
right?
Because
they get out of that manic state.
They've got that rubber band of up and downs, and would probably bring them more to the center. I don't know if it would be for everybody, but it probably would work for some, particularly those with any anxiety. I can imagine.
Anxiety is a big one. I've talked about it on the podcast a few times, but I know quite a couple girls, and they get crazy anxious, and they work in retail kind of jobs or call center jobs where they're dealing with customer complaints, and they smoke in the morning before they go to work, right? And then they're just chilled out through all of work, just because that cannabis just kind of alleviates that. And it lets them go about their day. You wouldn't even know that they're stoned.
It's working on the nervous system and all of these different, bodily functions, because it has that kind of, returning to the middle.
Yeah.
That CBD kind of impacts the body in really profound ways that we don't necessarily recognize. It's all in our body.
Yeah. And when we were coming again into that whole consciousness kind of question, cannabis is a psychedelic. A lot of people really don't understand that cannabis is psychoactive, which we talk about, but what does that really mean? It really, to me, and to how a lot of people understand it, is you start operating at a higher level where you kind of remove yourself as the individual and you start looking at things of how things are interconnected. Rather than looking at how am I connected to you, I'm looking at how are we all connected together. And it just kind of builds up on there. And it's taking that level of consciousness. You imagine the highest level of consciousness would be a godlike thing. I see all, I understand all, I can comprehend that. Getting high gets you not to a god level, but it takes you up a level where you start thinking a little more socially consciously of what's going on around you in the world, in the city, wherever you are. And I think that's actually a big threat to present governing bodies and things like that, because if people start thinking about, these people are fucking us over, maybe we should do something. It's such a control that if you can imprison someone for thinking outside of that box, there's reason to keep that illegal. And I don't know how strong that is in Australia. Something you probably don't know is about the UN treaty we signed in the 60s that allowed us to grow opium, but also prohibited us from selling and growing and distributing cannabis. So we grow 50 or 75% of the world's opium supply.
Yeah, somewhere between that.
Somewhere between there, which is fucking massive, right?
It's huge. Like
Most of it's going into prescription.
when I
painkillers.
think of opium, I think
all in
of
Tasmania.
Afghanistan.
Yeah. Well, you've got your
Go to
CIA
Tassie, baby.
and everything there, but in Tassie, we grow more than Afghanistan.
Wow.
And this is for all of your Oxycontin, your morphine, and all of this. And you have the pharmaceutical companies that have been producing this now getting sued because people have been dying and forming massive addictions to oxy, etc.
particularly in the US.
And and it's interesting where cannabis fits in, because cannabis helps with a lot of the same things. Yeah,
it's true.
We're going, oh no, it's okay to prescribe someone fucking Oxycontin.
Especially in epilepsy, if we're talking about all of the painkillers and all of the medications that they put on, maybe like a cocktail of 5 or 6 different medications versus a particular strain of cannabis or something.
Yeah.
You know.
And when we were talking about strains, something we didn't even get into too much, and I won't do it too much here, is like certain strains, this one makes you happy and reduces anxiety. This one makes you happy, but increases your anxiety, right? There's certain things that will make people more anxious with cannabis.
It's pretty funny how you have that meme on the internet, which is like, no, bro, you just need to try a different strain because it's funny, but it's also like
it's very true,
semi-accurate.
One of the big things is it's finding what works for you. Personally, one of the things I look at throughout human history, throughout all of history on Earth, how long has cannabis existed? Well, since before humans. Right? It's fucking bizarre to me. And then we've been using it for thousands and thousands of years as medicines.
There's a symbiosis there.
All sorts of things. And it's like, you make this plant illegal, and suddenly you've got maybe more health issues than you know what have caused. Like maybe there is an actual link where we've been needing cannabis, whether it's in a raw form that doesn't get you high and you're juicing it, or you're just eating it, or you're using it as a topping, or however people are using it. Perhaps there's something there for health.
Well, in the US
or
and Australia, it was
potentially
used to
endemic of the reason maybe why it was banned or why people have switched off from it.
Yeah.
Where we went to the modern sort of synthesized, mass-produced sort of lifestyle. Where people would just eat 5 hamburgers in a row or mass-produced. Now we're moving more towards the holistic, grow natural sort of thing. And the government sort of like this brings back to that TGA issue. The regulators have not caught up with what maybe modern science is saying. No, we need a more holistic lifestyle. We need more natural sort of alternatives as well.
Yeah, it's really
because some drugs are good. And I mean, like,
they help with
drugs,
what they help.
Like something like Lipitor will help you with blood pressure.
Or insulin.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? I wish I thought it said insulin, because that's probably the best example. But there are actual chemicals. So there are herbs. There are sort of like natural alternatives that you could be using.
Yep.
And we're seeing that come up a lot more.
A lot of the processed medications are, they are plant medicines. They've been put through a process. And so I guess that's something that we are... Yeah, like the Western kind of canon, the scientific canon, is beginning to recognize that there are a lot of old wisdoms that it has actually, dismissed a bit too early. But there's a lot of scientific, like rich scientific and medical, information, and there's so much that we can do within the space of natural medicine. People have been working on it for hundreds of years in the East.
Well, it's apparently just fucking hoodoo voodoo, hippie voodoo.
Yeah, well, my mum's a kinesiologist, just for everyone. She does all the voodoo voodoo.
Some
shit.
of it is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it is.
Some of it definitely is, right?
It's true.
But some of it's, I'm a firm believer in it.
But you know what's interesting? It might be. But we always look at placebo, and then it fucking works for people. So even if it is fucking voodoo, hoodoo, blah, blah bullshit, but it somehow works for someone.
I think the mind is very powerful.
How can you dismiss that? Like... If something genuinely helps someone, doesn't help someone else, it doesn't mean it doesn't fucking work.
Well, it actually could be working on their body in one way that, you have a different biochemistry. Maybe it just doesn't fucking work for you. That's why different anxiety...
If it is the placebo effect, then let people take it anyway, because if they generally believe it works, great. Because you let people say, oh, it's placebo, so instead you could just take a sugar pill. But that's not a placebo to them.
The
if they know it's a sugar pill, it's not going to work.
It's not the same thing. It's all about like a belief in something.
Yeah. It also affects your other actions as well. Like if you want to be healthy, you take your multivitamins, you take your stuff, but then you also start walking.
You start to
You start watching your diet, and you start losing weight, and you start getting more healthy.
Little steps.
And that's a good thing, generally.
One of the things that I always kind of notice is like, when you take a Panadol, you instantly feel relief, but there's no way that fucker's worked yet. It's because you mentally know that it's going to do what it's going to do for you.
Yeah, sometimes I just take a Panadol.
I just take aspirin for that reason, because I don't get that with the Panadol. I never get the instant thing, but when you get the dissolved aspirin, I definitely know that works straight away, because dissolves straight in and it just goes right into your
Yeah.
blood vessels. Or does it? Maybe that's a placebo. I don't know.
A lot of the sublingual stuff is where you absorb the most. I don't know what
Immediately.
you call it, like bioavailability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like if you're taking CBD oil, for example, which is a derivative of cannabis, you normally just put it under the tongue and then you hold it there for 30 seconds and it'll absorb 80% better than if you were to swallow it.
Right.
And I think that's starting to come through. And one of the things I see with cannabis that's maybe going to change the medical landscape is actually the idea of vaporization. Could you imagine building vaporization towards other compounds like, say, Panadols and maybe even insulin and stuff like that, and you take it in a direct hit and maybe it punches you much quicker, and it actually helps with whatever kind
Like
of
if I had a
relief.
headache and I could just go,
How fucking good!
that would be so good. Yeah,
It'd be
it would be
insane.
way better.
Right?
Maybe
And
there's a
then sitting
reason
there and
for
waiting
slow
10 minutes going, oh, come on, Panadol, hurry up.
Like maybe there's a reason for the slow release in those tablets. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But
it could
how
be.
good would it be for you?
Yeah.
It's these kinds of ideas, and one thing, like, you know, you can believe in aromatherapy or not. I personally do believe in it. Like, shit makes me more relaxed. Like, it's just a given fact. But there's certain, you know, herbs and things like that, like lemon and mint, and they have these effects. Cannabis absorbs the smell of plants around it. And over thousands of years, it actually becomes in its genetical profile. So you have cannabis that smells like fucking lemons because it grew up near lemon trees.
Really?
Yeah, 100%.
I did not know that.
This is why you have so many strains with weird, quirky names. You've got Girl Scout cookies, which is like a chocolatey kind of thin mint. And it probably was maybe something that was mixed near a coca plant and then like some sort of mint sort of thing. And it gets that kind of vibe. And there's a cookie terpene. I can't remember what that is. But anyway, you have all of this and you've got these smells that actually work on the human body to relax you or whatever they do. Some are anti-inflammatory and all of this. Imagine you grab that smell, you grab the purest form of it, that pure terpene, you combine it with something psychoactive. So when you take that hit, maybe that effect is just punched you in the face 100 times over because you're literally getting high on the smell. Right? So I think that's a lot of how we're starting to learn about maybe how cannabis is really working is maybe more to do with smells than just that THC component.
Yeah, there's a variety of compounds in there. It's like a complex mixture.
It's a very complex mixture, but it's like, you know, imagine if you're starting to develop this and you're going deep in science and you really extract out those chemicals, you combine it. What happens then? You create those pure oils, or you could even go into some other forms of medicine, but that cannabis has the potential to change so much of medicine that we don't even know. Like, it's just such an unknown because we've just gone, nah, fuck it, blacklist it.
Yeah.
And we've lost hundreds of years of research.
Luckily, people are catching on.
We're catching up, and it's catching up fucking quick. And what frustrates me, because we're in Australia doesn't have the best soil, granted. Depends on the areas, but we just generally don't have the best soil. But we can
still
make
grow
good
shit.
soil.
Yeah.
But we have some of the best fucking light, some of the best fucking water, some of the best air quality. We could grow potentially literally the world's best supply of cannabis. Like, and we could almost do that year round. There's no fucking question. And if you want to jump on the greenie train, you know, like if you want to start getting rid of petrol and all of this, imagine fucking pumping in hemp, everything sort of hemp crops. You start producing hemp oil and you start producing hemp powered cars. It's possible. I don't know if you know this. You're a bit of a nerdy dude. You can actually turn hemp into fucking capacitors,
Really?
and they're more dense than present day capacitors.
How much does it cost, though, to do that?
I think it's fucking expensive,
Yeah,
but like,
okay.
let's
But
not break things down to cost.
Not yet.
Cost is fucking irrelevant in
Yeah.
my mind. If it's fucking doable, you'll find a way to do it at cost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's that
Yeah.
money doesn't matter in my mind for like development.
Yeah.
You know, that comes money comes as a result of development.
You got to spend money to make money.
Exactly.
Even if you don't make money.
I think one of the things
That's kind of cool. It's capacitors. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And there's also
So many
hempcrete.
fucking uses.
So
Yeah.
hempcrete, instead of like using gyprock and that sort of stuff for your walls for building houses, fireproof, can be bulletproof, like more resistant, and it's eco-friendly. So like it's like all of these kinds
It can
of
be
things.
eco-friendly if you're doing like regenerative agriculture, I'd say. Like if you're doing the big monocultural shit, it's still probably better than like a cotton farm, but it's not
We put a
that
big
much better.
emphasis on the cotton farms that are draining from soil. So cannabis actually gives back to the soil as well. That's like a whole other thing.
Yeah. It's
It's-
a bit of a better plant for the soil.
Yeah, you know, you've got these cotton farms that are literally just draining, you know, the Murray-Darling dry. And now these cotton farms aren't even operating. All they're doing is trading water tokens between each other. And that's how they're making a lot of money. They're not growing cotton as much anymore.
I reckon you could use hemp trees as like the canopy, right? And then you could have smaller organisms, like smaller little plants or maybe like fruits or veggies growing under them, so it creates an ecosystem. Then you don't necessarily have to, like, that would be a way to actually create organic cannabis and organic hemp, because then you would have, regardless of whether there are pesticides or whatever, there would be an actual like self-sustaining loop that is provided by nature itself.
For example, like a good way to stop pesticides, using them in a garden with when you're growing tomatoes, grow onions and garlic, right?
Yeah.
That stops a lot of the bugs from going anywhere near them. Yet on a commercial farm, you're not doing this because it's not as viable. Well, we're a tomato farm, right?
It's true.
So they'd rather spray it with a whole bunch of shit, and then you don't really know what's going into your food. And it's these things, I think, that are being often overlooked. And this is...
We can make environmental like reform and environmental changes, but they got to go to the very bottom, like our food systems and all that stuff.
What's frustrating to me is we've formed these kinds of crazy ideas of politics. It's like if you're on the left side, you're a fucking greenie, right? If you're on the right side, you're a gun nut fucking
Nazi,
right?
Don't like immigrants.
Fuck immigrants, even though they've saved the country. Like, where would the economy be otherwise?
It's funny,
right? And you just somehow there's no middle ground. Like, why can't you find? And it's like being on the middle. You're worse than both of them.
Yeah, that's when like the lefties and the righties beat you up because like, damn you centrists, pick a side, right?
Yeah, exactly. Join us or else.
Yeah. And the weird thing is, like, you know, regardless of whether you're left, right on the political spectrum or you identify with that, right? Many ways to crack an egg, and many people think about left politics or right politics in really diverse ways, and there's a lot of overlap. Like, you know, if we're talking about libertarians here, plenty of stuff about individual liberty and choice that I actually agree with to an extent, right? So fair enough, I'm into that, and there's so many other ideologies that they have a truth, you know, they have a perspective to them, so maybe
there's like a little bit of truth in them.
There's truth in most things, right? Like, it's just what's more true is what people jump to.
And we're always trying
just
to
like there is some truth, but then what grew out of that truth is like something that's not true and it's just horrible.
Could be. You know, and that's the thing is like there's so much potential for, if you're just thinking about theory and ideology, very different to practice and the way that you execute on the ground level. And like linking those two things together and being able to communicate with each other on these issues. That's the dialectic where we actually learn from each other. Like the left learns from the right. Really, if you think about it, left and right are just, in my opinion, a way to divide up the working class. It's a way to divide up regular people in comparison to super mega powerful people. And because they don't have, like, their politics is just keep things relatively the same. That's a pretty centrist approach, but it's centrist within the kind of like bourgeois idea.
It's very authoritarian.
It is, So, you know, left, right, regardless of whether you sit on that, just recognize that you're a regular human being like every other cunt, regardless of what you do, right? And that's, part of it is seeing that they're your brothers and sisters. Work together with them, you know, even if you're competing with them, right? I don't know.
No, it's fair enough. Yeah, that's a good point.
I think that's a pretty good area to kind of start wrapping up on.
Yeah, we're at like 1:07, guys, or 1 hour 7.
1 minute 7. Jeez, it's the longest 1 minute ever.
It's the longest minute of all time.
Fuck, I've smoked too much weed. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Anthony, for coming on.
Yeah, that was great. That was fun.
Yeah, this was good. Thank you.
I really appreciate being able to come on, guys. And look, if you're in Ipswich, I have to plug myself here.
Of course.
Like if you're in Ipswich and you're living in Division 2 and you liked some of the things I said at the start of the podcast, then vote for me on the 20th of March.
Anthony Bull, vote 1.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Catch you next time, maybe. See ya.
Cool.